As you probably already know, we don't talk about video games that much on this channel. I mean, it's a passion of mine in my spare time, but I like to keep the focus on film and TV. But with that said, The Last of Us 2 is coming out this Friday, and I just can't avoid the topic. I'm so excited for this game, and so what I wanted to do was not necessarily talk about The Last of Us 2 itself, but talk about the HBO TV series of The Last of Us, which is supposed to be coming out soon. This is definitely one of the biggest pieces of production news to come out this year, and so with The Last of Us 2 on the horizon, now seems like as good a time as any to talk about it. But before we get into that, I just want to say thanks again, as always, for coming to my channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, why not do so now? It'll make my day if you do. And I don't know for sure if I'm going to talk about any spoilers for The Last of Us, but if I do, just heed this as a spoiler warning now, just in case if you haven't played the game yet. Best to play it before watching this video. So anyway, let's dive right in. So for anyone who missed the news, earlier this year HBO greenlit a full television series adaptation of The Last of Us, with the show being helmed by two people, Craig Mazin, the showrunner and writer for Chernobyl, and Neil Druckmann, who a lot of people will know as the vice president for Naughty Dog Studios, the video game company that made The Last of Us. And while this is certainly a match made in heaven, I'm quite surprised that it's taken this long for an adaptation to get off the ground. I mean, after all, in the streaming service wars that we've seen over the last couple of years, the fight has really been to see which service can gain the most exclusives as quickly as possible. And now with HBO Max on the market, it seems as though HBO is looking to do the same by finally diving into that great untapped resource of adaptation, video games. Now, it's no secret to say that, for the most part, video game adaptations have been terrible. There are a few outliers like Detective Pikachu that try and do a bit more with their source material, but for the most part, some of these adaptations are just horrific. But the tide seems to be changing, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this is really down to the efforts of Netflix. The streaming service has made an incredible anime based on the Castlevania series, but most recently, The Witcher has completely steamrolled through most people's expectations of the show. And while it's fair to point out that this adaptation of The Witcher is based upon the novels of the same name, I do think that the show's success is largely due to that huge fan base made by the video games. And so with that in mind, The Last of Us could really be the first true video game to TV series adaptation that works. And if it does, do not be surprised when all of the streaming services pretty much go out of their way to snap up as many video game adaptation licenses as they possibly can. But while we're here, I want to delve into exactly why I am excited for this series. And I think it goes without saying that the story, first and foremost, is the key attraction here. Anyone who's played The Last of Us from start to finish knows that not only is this a masterpiece of video game storytelling, but it's also, arguably, I would say, one of the great pieces of modern American fiction. In the bleak, post-apocalyptic world that the game presents, every single day is a struggle for the characters. It really makes you feel for them, and it gives you the chance to peer into the human psyche when it's put under such immense pressure in moments like this. Something that's very tricky to present outside of this particular genre. But on top of that, I'm really excited to see how this world gets presented in a physical form, particularly with the film's main villains, the Clickers. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with the Clickers, these are humans turned into monsters through this unrelenting virus that has swept the world, which leaves them without any shred of personality, replacing it with a complete bloodlust for anyone who isn't infected. Anyone who is familiar, though, will remember that one of the most striking things about the Clickers is their design. These are monsters that are designed to strike fear just by looking at them, and so I think you could arguably make them even scarier in an adaptation if you use practical effects. Think of the great horror set pieces in film over the years: Alien, American Werewolf in London. All of these types of projects made great use of practical effects, and what you got was some of the most intense scares you'll ever bear witness to. And so it would be amazing to see that same sort of horror carried across into this adaptation. Of course, one of the big points of speculation, particularly online, is the casting for the series. Names like Hugh Jackman and Carl Urban have been thrown into the mix, and hey, both are particularly fine actors. But for me, I'm a bit more set on who I would like to see portray Ellie. And with this piece of casting, my mind goes specifically to Sophia Lillis of the It series. She did such a fantastic job with her portrayal of Beverly in both of those movies, and so she's one of the few actors that I feel could do the role of Ellie justice. Beyond casting though, it'll be interesting to see if HBO uses any of the things that it learnt from working on Chernobyl in this adaptation. My guess is that because the short 5-episode season worked so well for Chernobyl, we might see a replication of that here, with a much tighter story across a smaller couple of episodes. Hopefully nothing along the lines of the last season of Game of Thrones, but we'll see. In fact, there was one key piece of information in the press release for The Last of Us TV series that did get me thinking. It mentioned that if the show did get picked up for a second season, it would more than likely follow the events of the second game. And ahead of the game's release, that sounds fantastic. I mean, after all, it's getting tens across the board. But what I want you to bear in mind is that if it does get that second season, where does it go after that? I can't imagine that a third game in the Last of Us series would come out before a third season of the show, and that has me worried slightly. After what happened with the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, I'm now slightly paranoid about what could happen with any adaptation that starts out with good intentions, but once it moves beyond its source material and tries to make its own path, can it really stick the landing? Only time will tell, but for now, I'm still very excited because there's still the potential for this show to be really good, and it could have a huge impact on the industry if it does succeed. But what about you? Are you equally as excited for the show to come out, or do you think it's just a disaster waiting to happen? Whatever your opinions are, please let me know in the comments below.